After a year of waiting comes the newest Game Boy Davis video. I'd like to thank everyone who has harassed me into doing this. Dan. The game originally released in 1996 before having a war game released in 1997, Deadlands The Great Rail Wars. After that, Deadlands became a setting for the generic RPG Savage Worlds. We're talking about the 2021 release. I'll talk about what I liked and disliked about the setting. This book adds a lot of options for players to choose from. Just about any Western archetype can be played with how many edges, hindrances, and archetypes are added by the setting. Although, like a lot of Savage World settings with magic, most of these archetypes are arcane backgrounds, meaning they're magical casters, even if Free Favor does weird science. Though that usually isn't as big of a deal since most defined archetypes in Savage Worlds are arcane backgrounds, usually due to gameplay reasons. But it's also obvious the creators have their own favorites. Hucksters and Harrow take up way more space than the others. Hucksters are magicians who manifest their magic through cards, mostly because that's how magic was encoded in Hoyle's book of games, based on the real card player and author, Edmund Hoyle, which is a book of magic in the setting. The other archetypes that an unusually large page count is the Harrowed, which is the undead option for players. You can either invest ages into becoming one, or just die and hope you draw a Joker and be raised back from the dead. The reason the archetype takes so much space is just due to the sheer amount of hard exclusive edges and rules. Though its most unique mechanics are counting Q and Minion. The former allows you to copy monster abilities when they die in your proximity, assuming you make the roll, and this is well supported in the book because almost every monster will have a line that tells you what abilities you get for counting Q, which I don't think I've ever seen in a game that where a stat block will just have an option specifically for one of the players. The book provides a decent collection of items appropriate to the period, as well as a handy table of services. Not much to add here, just an overall good selection. The collection of weapons is pretty solid, with a lot of options to choose from to fit your character's fantasy. Hold on. These pistols look similar to one another. Ah, no, I'm just sure. I'm just like, it's just because I'm skimming through the section. Let's take a closer look. Okay, the ranges are mostly identical. So is the damage. I mean, some of these deal one more point of damage than the others. AP is the same, rate of fire is the same, shots are the same, minimum strength is also the same. Okay, look, the weight is different, and so is the cost. Okay, so the revolvers are identical, some of them worse than others, with the exception of the Lamat and Buntline. All of them are the same weapon with very small, minute differences. There are two reasons for this. One, the guns are on the lower end of weapons for the system. The range and damage is just as low as you can go without making something so weak it's unusable or so specialized like the Derringer. And two, Savage Worlds lacks the granularity to meaningfully differentiate between a lot of weapons, especially of this category. I mean, the bullet caliber is different, but most of these are still small ammunitions, and the game doesn't provide you with any maps or information as to what weapons are common where and who has it outside of some NPC stat blocks. Taking a look at the other weapons, we can see there's more variety even in the same categories. The increased stat range provides some breathing room for the design to actually create niches that can be filled with the various options. So yeah, I think most of the revolvers should be removed and consolidated. The same thing with the rifles, though not to the same extent. I know, this will anger the gun porn enthusiasts, but I don't think they were really interested in Savage Worlds to begin with. Go play the GURPS version for that. As for infernal devices and vehicles, I can't really comment on those. They're usually too expensive for the party to buy. Life in the Weird West. These are some of the best parts of the book. The book covers costs and rules for mundane items and services, sending telegraphs, improvised train schedules, and meal carts. Always good for role-playing breakfast scenes. Although the section about superstitions could have used a few more paragraphs, as it led to me playing a lot of NPCs as various shades of cartoon skeptic who doesn't believe in monsters or doesn't understand the situation. No, there can't be a monster, but I saw it. No, you're seeing things. This is terrifying. I don't know what's happening. A monster did it and we killed it. Okay, yeah, thanks, here. The book comes with a few setting rules. One of them has to do with single and double action revolvers, and it just highlights the point I was making earlier. The only difference in the two revolver types is in their supporting edges. The former allows Fan the Hammer, which turns the revolver into an especially awful automatic weapon, And the latter allows double tap, which consumes double the ammo for a +1 to hit and damage. That's it. That is the only difference between the two types. Without either edges, they are identical. Let's talk about something more fun duels. The way they work is a bit strange, but bear with me. Each duelist is handed one card kept hidden from the other. The two duelists then play 2 rounds of combat where neither side can shoot or prepare a shooting reaction. That means you pretty much spend the entire time using the test action, a raise on which will give you an extra card or deprive your opponent of one. On the third round, both duelists choose a card from their hand to reveal, and that's their initiative. Any damage dealt cannot be soaked, and from there it proceeds into a normal combat. I have tested this with a friend, and it didn't feel particularly tense. Maybe it's because we were testing it outside of an actual game, or maybe because there's a lack of emotional connection because the other side was a nameless NPC, or for some other reason. In either case, I think it was fine. Those didn't come up, so I can't comment on them. I love a lot with the adventures the setting provides. It avoids a common problem in a lot of fantasy and sometimes horror games, where the same creatures are used in multiple adventures. You know, kobolds, goblins, demons, ghouls, that kind of thing. With few exceptions, most creatures in a Deadlands adventure are going to be unique to that adventure. For example, there's an adventure where a worm was mind controlling miners to gather gold, another one where an old tree raised the dead to snatch the residents of a town, another one with a bog residing a horse eater, and so on. The investigation is fine, but becomes a problem when combined with a common adventure format for Savage Worlds, the one sheet, where an adventure fits on 1 or 2 pages, which isn't quite conducive for an investigation. I just talked about how I like the variety of adversaries in Deadlands Adventures, but I don't like the assumed party composition, which I don't think any of the adventures even acknowledge. Some of them assume a character will have an arcane background and have a specific power, or at least access to some in order to banish or seal the monster away. This isn't your typical fantasy game where you can just hire a local caster or buy a magical scroll to make up for the deficiency. And the lack of arcane characters isn't uncommon in my experience. So many of the people I introduced this setting to made mundane characters because, coming from fantasy, the fantasy of a gunslinger is much more appealing than a caster, so they gravitate towards that, and I end up with parties that can't use any powers. I don't think this is an unreasonable outcome. I just wish those kinks were ironed out, or the adventure should at least tell me what the expected party composition is. There's also another problem I encountered while running Horror at Headstone Hill, a longer sandbox campaign. The horror is supposed to be somewhat subtle and hidden. It doesn't make itself obvious to everyone. The characters usually need to find it, but that premise becomes much harder to buy when every single location they go to has a supernatural mystery. Paraphrasing one of the players, he said, "It's hard to buy that the horror is supposed to be hidden when you keep tripping over them." Though to be fair, I don't know how common of an issue this is. After all, I only ran one short campaign of the setting and a few one-shots. So, what's the verdict? I would recommend playing in this setting using Savage Worlds, but I can't really speak for other iterations of the setting, such as the D20 or Ghost versions. It has a decent amount of player options that fits the genre, monsters to build adventures around, and a decently large backlog floor. So go play it. You might enjoy it. I sure did. Not as much as other games or genres, but I still enjoyed it.